verse 211. There are 4 psychic powers. That which comes from the maturing of the disciplinary exercises. That which comes from the sustaining power of the Buddhas. That which rises from entering into the various paths of living beings. And that which is obtained in a dream. My heart always sinks a little bit at the mention of psychic powers, because the whole notion of psychic powers has got nothing to do with what these videos are about, and indeed with what this text is about. But it's what interests people. And each time psychic powers come up, I have to go through the usual expectations here, stressing this, that notions of psychic powers have got nothing to do with the teachings. And such videos actually seem to be amongst the most popular of mine, but only because I put psychic powers on whatever into the tags. So here we are again, psychic powers, and it says there are 4 psychic powers. But before I look at that, let me just state once again, as far as psychic powers are concerned, let's see the evidence. Personally, I believe in the possibility of all sorts of supernormal powers, but I hold back judgment until I've seen the proof. I was thinking in this respect about Uri Geller. Here's somebody who's made a career, made a living out of apparently having psychic powers. I remember when he first came over to the UK and demonstrated them on television, and he was very convincing. And I thought, well, this must be the real deal. And scientists were going to examine him, do experiments and test his powers. Whatever happened to all that? What were the results? What were the outcomes? There seem to be some academics who believe in him, but there seem to be many people who don't. And I have to say, I think a lot of the people that claim to emulate his powers are not as convincing as Geller himself. On the other hand, a really good fraudster believes in their own fraudulence. They somehow believe they have the power, and yet will do trickery to maintain that illusion. They don't have that dividing line between the illusion and the reality. Uri Geller seems like a nice enough fellow, but I find myself not quite trusting him. But then again, let's just assume he is what he claims to be, and that he can bend keys with a little gentle stroke. So what? So what? What does this tell us? And let's assume that the scientific establishment accepts the reality of his power. So that power becomes part of the conventional understanding. And even if people could levitate through the air, and this became an everyday occurrence, that would become part of the conventional understanding. And these teachings that are presented here in the Lankavatara Sutra, teachings of Zen, have got nothing to do with conventional understanding. But let's look at this verse and see what we can make of it. There are 4 psychic powers, but these psychic powers are not actually described. The sources of the psychic powers are what is described. So perhaps this should really mean there are 4 sources of psychic powers, because it doesn't really make sense otherwise. And the first one is that which comes from the maturing of the disciplinary exercises. And this is the the carrot to getting on with your good behaviour. You know, if you do these exercises, if you do your hatha yoga, if you do your meditation, and if you practice the precepts, then you're going to become some kind of superhuman being. Well, let's see the evidence. Let's see the evidence. Certainly, if you pursue yoga and similar exercises with the idea that you're going to obtain supernormal powers, then I think at some point you're going to be disappointed because you're stuck in conventional reality. And there's another source of psychic powers, the sustaining power of the Buddhas. This is a nice one, isn't it? I think the way I would understand this verse, rather than psychic powers, I would see that what's being described here as sources of empowerment. Sources of empowerment that are necessary in order to be enlightenment practitioners. And the disciplinary exercises can be useful. Once you've touched enlightenment, the mind still has to be worked on, and you use whatever techniques are necessary to work on the mind. As I've said before, once enlightenment is reached, once it's touched, that's when the real work begins. Up until that point, you're just fumbling around in the dark or playing some kind of game. So it's then that you need to work on the mind, because the mind can still not cooperate a lot of the time. So some exercises can be empowering one's practice as an enlightenment practitioner. Now, there is a problem with this in that it's you who's doing it. And this can feed the ego. So doing lots of meditation, doing your hatha yoga, doing your ethical practice, becoming a better person, there's a very subtle but powerful ego-enhancing process going on. And this is why the next one is good. The next source of empowerment is important, that which comes from the sustaining power of the Buddhas, because you mustn't take any credit for this. In fact, these videos, I sometimes feel a little bit embarrassed when people leave an appreciative comment, although it's nice that they do so. But I don't feel I'm doing anything here. They might thank me for all the work I've done in these videos, and I don't know. And as I say, that's very nice, but I don't feel I'm doing any work. I feel I'm under some sort of imperative here. I'm only really doing it because nobody else is doing it. It's something that needs to be done. And it's not really under my own steam. So I would give credit here to the sustaining power of the Buddhas, because there's no way I could do these hundreds of videos under my own steam. It's not the sort of thing I do. I'm the sort of person that starts a project and then another project captures my attention and the first project gets forgotten. So usually my mind's all over the place, getting interested in this and interested in that, and I really get things finished. So it's always a bit of an achievement when I actually do get through something. So these videos, if I thought it was my project, then it would never have got very far. So let's thank the sustaining power of the Buddhas for this project. I sometimes wonder, is this project driven along by my ego? Because I am interested in the number of hits I get and how many likes I get and how popular the videos are. But it's not that strong, I have to say, because I don't actually want these videos to be popular. It would be dreadful if they really caught on, because the chances are they'd be catching on for the wrong reason. So it's really important that these videos never gain mass appeal, because the chances are it'd be for completely the wrong reason. So my ego can't really thrive too strongly on this, and I give all credit for them to the sustaining power of the Buddhas. And the third source of empowerment here is that which rises from entering into the various paths of living beings. I'm reminded here of a particular story in the Yoga Vasishta, where one yogi went into the psyche of another yogi. I think it was on a subatomic level. And there seems to be a little bit of a suggestion that's what's being indicated here. But what's really being described here is the arena of spiritual practice. And that arena is the arena of everyday life. One of my videos a while back received quite a nice sympathetic comment, because I'd been going through a very difficult time. I'd started a new job outside my comfort zone, and I'm wondering if I'd actually might have undergone something like a nervous breakdown. Certainly something very uncomfortable and painful was working itself out through my system. Even at the time, I saw it as a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity to remember these teachings and to get things in perspective. In the Yoga Vasishta, the teachings were often communicated through stories of great trauma, great emotional distress. And it's at these points that we're being sucked right in to the conventional reality. And the challenge is to remember what we're about as enlightenment practitioners. Even though there's a great deal of pain going on, whether it's physical pain or psychological and emotional pain, this is incredibly empowering. You're not likely to find this kind of opportunity if you go off and live in an ashram or some nice custom-built retreat centre. These places are wonderful, and it's good to make use of them. But you really need to be confronted. Otherwise, the mind is just going to go into quiescence. And as soon as you come out of these nice conditions, the mind will engulf you. So everyday life offers a similar opportunity to practicing the disciplinary exercises. It's a way of bringing the mind round once again, so that it reminds you to practice rather than supports avoidance. And finally, the final source of empowerment is that which is obtained in a dream. And again, there's an inclination to believe in spiritual teachings which are transmitted through dreams. There was a book I read years ago called Ekankar by Paul Twitchell. It's a rather wonderful little book. I wouldn't particularly recommend it, but it's wonderful in the sense of portraying quite a fantastic possibility. The idea that you get spiritual teachings in your sleep which take you to another advanced level of consciousness, and then within that level of consciousness you find another temple or something and a teaching and so on. It takes you up the consciousness ladder. But again, I don't think this is what's being referred to here. If you've watched a lot of these videos, you'll notice that one of the great tools we've got in appreciating these teachings and appreciating our situation is by reference to dream. Not to the content of the dream, but to the phenomenon itself. Because here we can observe consciousness at work, consciousness doing what it does. And what it does in dream is exactly what it's doing all the time, whether in dream or in the waking state. So we can apply what we observe in the phenomenon of dream to the phenomenon of being awake. This gives us a very clear understanding of the reality of our situation. So this in itself is very empowering. I personally find this understanding pretty ironclad and very obvious, and because of this, very empowering. Again, I'm the sort of person who likes to see both sides of an argument. I'm not very good at making decisions or coming to conclusions and all the rest of it. I'm quite an ambivalent person. I sit on the fence a lot. But as far as these teachings are concerned, woof, there's no room for any doubt. It is as it's being communicated. It's extraordinarily powerful in its simplicity and obviousness. So I apologise for going on a bit long here, but I'd just like to finish with verse 212, which is connected. The psychic power which is obtained in a dream, that which comes from the power of the Buddhas, and that which has its birth by entering the various paths of beings, these powers are not born of the maturing of the disciplinary exercises. There's a distinction being made here. There's a distinction being made between the conventional training of the spiritual seeker, yoga, meditation, and following ethical precepts. It's saying here that the other three powers are not dependent on them. And this is quite important, because conventional Buddhists, conventional yogis, for them the main thing is their practice, the traditional practice. And the idea is that with this practice comes purification, and then with that purification becomes access to not only supernormal powers, but higher possibilities, higher consciousness, if you like, higher states of consciousness. But this verse is telling us, no. You've got access to the power of the Buddhas regardless. You can get on with your spiritual development within the context of everyday life. You don't have to be living as a Buddhist or in some other kind of spiritual context, an ashram or whatever. You get on with it now, this very day, and consider what's going on in dreams. These give you the most powerful arguments, the most powerful case for our understanding the nature of consciousness, at least from an intellectual point of view. So this verse seems to be suggesting that there's an overemphasis on these traditional practices, the practices of following ethical precepts, practices of meditation, of hatha yoga and whatever. Enlightenment practice does not depend on this.